and welcome to Filmarket Hub Talks. My name is Rosalind and I'm the UK manager, and I'm really excited to welcome Karol Griffiths today online. Karol is a development producer and consultant, and she's had over 20 years experience as a script editor. She's also the author of The Art of Script Editing, which I strongly recommend to check out. Hello, Karol. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming online today.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
It's been fantastic having you as the jury of our first ever TV pilot competition, and also of the feature film competition that launched last year. So thank you for coming online and just telling us a little bit about yourself and your career today. We're really, really thrilled to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And when did you first get into script editing, and what drew you to that role?
It's really interesting because, yeah, I mean, like all of us, when you start out, you don't quite know well, some people do, but most people don't necessarily know what they want to do. And I just knew I really wanted to be in the world of storytelling in whatever form. And so I started in theater and did years and years of theater. And then I ended up working on a show and being asked by one of the actors on the show if I wanted to work with some filmmakers. And I said, well, look, I don't know anything at all about film. And they said, well, you don't need to, we'll teach you. And that ended up being the Coen brothers. So that was my first gig. And, but all along, it was always, I kind of, even in the theater, I kind of always knew that somehow it was about the writing. It very soon became clear that it was the actual writing. I was always drawn to the writers. Like even when I was working on theater, I would be like sitting right by the playwright. It was always like, you know, what does he want to change? What is she, you know, what's going on with the storytelling? And then being with the Coen brothers, I was lucky enough to hear them like writing their scripts and kind of going, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, you know, kind of knowing pretty early on. But even still, after that, I kind of took some detours because I also really wanted to have a lot of different experiences. And I think that that's really helped my career. I mean, I've done a lot of different jobs. I was casting, obviously PA work, writer's room work, script supervising work. A little stand-in. I've done like kind of everything at one point, or even some AD stuff, like, you know, very like basic AD stuff. And that's helped me in the fact that when you're working on a production, that you just kind of know what everybody's doing and how the struggles everybody has, so that you have sympathy and care for what everybody does. And it's really helped, I think, my career overall, which sounds really strange, but it has. I think just having a sense of what everybody's dealing with has helped me working with writers and working with producers, and just kind of trying to make the process as easy as possible.
I mean, having worked with award-winning screenwriters like the Coen brothers and Steven Spielberg, could you tell us a little bit about that experience working with them and what you learned from that?
Sure. I mean, I think when I think back on it, I mean, I think the main thing that I really realized was just how dedicated and how hardworking they are. They treat it is a job. They treat it like, you know, even on days when, you know, they're just going in to write or whatever, they have a schedule. They have planned ahead. They have, you know, they are in at 9:30, they take an hour lunch and they leave. And, you know, at dinner at like 6 o'clock, unless they have other things to do. And so the discipline of how they discipline their time and how much time it takes. You know, I think that's one of the things that young screenwriters really forget is, by young, I mean not in age, I mean in the process, but that we're all so used to things coming very quickly and instantly. And you know, when those scripts took 3 years, 4 years to work on every day, and not just in the writing, but also storyboarding and planning, but also in the writing, some of them took quite a few years, you know, and letting them sit and then coming back to them after a couple of months. So I think that it's patience in a way, dedication in a way, and kind of a work ethic that was just very, very determined to kind of treat it like a job. And even when there was no buyer for film, there were no producers involved, it was just like, okay, we don't know what's going to happen with this project, but treating it every day like this is my job. And that was a great lesson, and this is something I have to remind writers all the time, kind of go, yes, I know you've done 3 or 4 drafts, but we're talking about people who, some of these scripts have been through 30 drafts, 40 drafts. And not that they have to be, but it's a matter of allowing them to each project to take the time it needs to be done, and not feel like you're up against the time all the time, like just letting it breathe a bit. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's thank you for sharing that. We really don't often hear that said enough. I think we do live in a bit of a microwave culture where kind of expect results probably far quicker than it takes in screenwriting, because it does take so long to get it right.
It really does. And I mean, even when, if you're working in the theater, you can play with things, and you can you have a bad night, you can change it, the next day the writer can be there and you can try something new the next night. But when you're filming, it's on film, and you want it, so you really, the preparation, it's all about the preparation and getting it as close to what you really want it to be as possible. And I think, I know that it isn't always, you're not always able to take your time, because you're on deadline sometimes. And sometimes, you're a writer for hire. It's not like, oh, this is my baby. You're writing for a brief and you have to do that. But certainly, I think that, there's a lot of times when we need that extra time, we should be taking that time. And it's my philosophy anyway. I know that not everyone would agree, but I think that when you take your time, especially for those really passion projects, it pays off.
So you also work with both professional writers with a lot of experience, but you also work with emerging writers and first-time writers. Aside from the experience, what would you say are the main differences you find when you're working with both of them?
Oh, interesting. Let me think about that. I think one is as I said, the patience, and knowing that it is going to take time, and not expecting so much from yourself, like when you're just at the story exploration phase. Like you're building whatever story you're telling, you're building a world, you're creating people. I mean, even when it's a true story, you're still exploring the true lives of these people, so it does take time. So it's a little bit about reminding new writers to be patient with themselves and not so hard on themselves. And I guess the other difference in terms of working with writers is oftentimes I will give newer writers different exercises to do to kind of help strengthen parts that maybe I think, that this would benefit they would have a new way of looking at something, and sometimes it's stuff that they don't want to do and they hate it and they're like, why are you making me do this? But then usually after they have like at least one of those experiences, they go, oh, you know what, that was painful, but I really get why we did that, and I have a new way of looking at things. So sometimes it's just trying to help the writer think about it from their story or their writing process from another point of view, to help expand the experience, because obviously an audience is going to be a lot of different kinds of people. So you want your point of view, but you also want to have it be a story that communicates to a lot of different people. So that's one thing I try to work on. And certainly, I guess the hardest thing, I guess this would be another thing, the hardest thing I think for writers that are professional and or newer is when you're writing really personal stories. Because really personal stories, they take the longest, because you're trying to honor people you care about. You're trying to also be truthful, and you probably have a very strong reason for wanting to tell that story. And in my experience, those are the ones that are the most delicate, that they take the longest to achieve. They ultimately can be the best stories out there, because they're so personal. but when a new writer comes to me and they're like, this is my story, this happened to me, I know it's going to take a while, and I kind of try to go, okay, please be patient with yourself and me, because you've got a lot of things you want to accomplish with this, and there's a lot more at stake in a way for those stories. So yeah, and with a more experienced writer, I think a more experienced writer knows when, in a way, might not even want to do that right away. They're going to do that less often, try to be as personal. They're going to distance themselves a little bit. And when it is personal, they'll know that they kind of have a pace that they know about. They know their process by then. So that's a little bit easier. And I think the other thing that I've learned is to prioritize. Really look at what's going on with the writing that's at hand, where you are right now with the work, and rather than trying to do 10 things to fix something, look at the one big thing. Is there one big thing that's going on, that, character development, or there's not enough, conflict, or whatever that one thing might be, and allowing yourself to focus on that first, because usually that will fix a lot of the little things. So it's sort of that, and I think so often with an experienced writer, I'll give them very few notes. I'll just say, what, really, there's not enough conflict. That might be the only note I give them, because they're experienced enough. So it's sort of kind of figuring out how much to tell a writer, because it is their story, and you don't want to over explain or over kind of complicate things for them. You just want to tell them the important bits to look at.
Fantastic notes, thank you. Writing is an ongoing process. What advice would you give to particularly emerging writers in terms of how to establish a rhythm and a pattern of writing? I mean, are you a big believer in writing daily, or what advice would you give to someone who's perhaps starting out in writing, but also perhaps has a day job, for example?
I think that we have to honor our own rhythms. We have to know our, it's like asking somebody, what kind of diet do you want to have, right? You have to really, it's going to be different. Some are vegan, some are meat eaters, and so you have to kind of figure out, are you a morning person? Are you a night person? What's your situation with your work and your family? And I think, obviously, ideally, you do write every day, and ideally you do have set hours. And certainly I think people, when they've come to terms with with finding a rhythm of what they can do, that's when there is the most kind of success. But if you're floundering at a point where you don't really know what that is, just trying different things and not going, I should be doing this from 8 a.m. till noon. Well, if you feel that way and it's been 6 months and you've not been able to do that, then I say try from noon to 4. Like, don't keep trying the same thing, hoping for a different result, right? Try something else and see what does work for you. It may be that what works for you is, okay, as long as I do 2 hours a day, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. And certainly, with COVID and all the things that are going on just in personal lives, being, a little bit kind to yourself if you miss a day, not beating yourself up, because beating yourself up, you usually end up losing another day. And just kind of, trying to set a goal that is achievable for you, whatever that is, even if it's once a week. I mean, as long as you keep at it, it builds, so, and certainly the more it builds, the more you want to do it, and the more it will kind of unfold, and it will continue to work for you. So I would say, ultimately, try different things and find your rhythm, and don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Think about what works for you in your family, in your situation.
Great advice. Scripts can be edited and re-edited indefinitely. Mm-hmm. When should a screenwriter hand it over and just go, you know what, it's finished? How do we know it's finished and it's ready?
I think that it happens in stages. I mean, I think that there is a point after you've written it and you kind of gotten everything down on the page and let it, if you can let it sit a little while and go back to it. I think that's probably one of the hardest things for a writer to do, is kind of just let it sit.
Mm-hmm.
But really, when you can let your writing sit and you go back to it, even if it's only like a couple of weeks, if you can let it sit for 2 weeks and you read it back, you'll have so much, reading it back the day after you finished is such a different experience than 2 weeks later. It's become so much clearer the more distance you have. So if you can allow yourself that, and then you go back to it and you'll see what is and isn't working, broad strokes, like, oh, did I say what I wanted to say with this? How close am I? And I think when you get to a point where you feel close, like at least, it's not perfect, but it's close, then I think the ideal thing is to have someone you trust read it. And that doesn't have to, that can just be if you have a writer friend read it, who, it doesn't matter who it is, but somebody you trust who's gonna, is gonna be honest with you and kind, but honest, and kind of get some feedback that way. And see, not so much about the feedback isn't about them telling you, what didn't work, but the feedback is telling you what did they think the story was, what did they get out of the story. And so from that feedback, you kind of know, you'll know, have I, did I accomplish what I set out to accomplish? Am I getting the reaction I hope to? And then you can kind of decide. But it is, I mean, these are living organisms, and, you're constantly learning. So even a script that's been sitting, that's been in and out of the drawer for 6 years, you might end up still rewriting, because if you've learned something new about the character, you've learned something new. So I say that it's never going to feel 100% ready, but if it's close and you feel good about it and you're getting good feedback from people you trust, then I would say it's worth allowing a few other people to read it. Maybe your agent, maybe, someone in the industry, and getting one or two bits more feedback, and then seeing, okay, should I be adjusting it anymore? And there may be notes that you don't agree with, and you ignore those, and you just keep going till you find people, till you've heard, unless you've heard that note 10 times, then you kind of go, that was one person's opinion. Mm-hmm. So my process when I work with writers is, I like to, even for myself as someone who works with writers, because I read their scripts so many times, I have close friends who also do what I do, and we exchange scripts, and we'll say, this is my client's script, will you read this and I'll read theirs, because we're at a point where we can't see it quite as clearly. So, and we'll go, oh, this is what I thought. And so you kind of need a little network of people you trust. And that can be people you pay, or it could be a writer's group, or it could be, friends from Filmarket Hub, or whatever the groups that you're involved with, so that that you have a safe place to get feedback, and just getting a little, that the more feedback you get, the more clarity. And it may be that the feedback just informs you that, hey, I'm perfectly on the right track. Great when that happens, or it might be one little thing. So I would say it's not about diving in. It's about put your toe in, put your foot in, walk in a little bit, Some people would disagree. They'd say dive right in. But my experience is, I think it's a delicate process, and I like to take it one step at a time.
No, that's fantastic advice. And along the same lines, at which stage should a screenwriter, if they should at all, work with a script editor? Would you say it's when they've had feedback that they've got a bit stuck, or at what point would you advise working with a script editor?
Well, I think, again, it's like so much of it is just such a personal process. I mean, I have clients that I work with from the moment they have their concept of their idea, and we just start talking about that idea, and then it builds from there. And then, I kind of work with them until it's done, hopefully, even when it's being filmed, but that doesn't always happen. But then there are other people that really need that, like, absolute silence to get the story clear in their head, and they'll come to me once they've got a first draft. or they'll come to me fifth draft when they just kind of go, okay, I think it's done, and so it's a really, really personal experience. And I think you have to, I think there is something, I would say you shouldn't be sending it out to a lot of people. I think it's really important to have some of that quiet space. And so if I'm working with a client too, and they say, oh, I'm going to send it to so-and-so and so-and-so, and I'll just say, you know what, it's too soon. Like, hear what you think first. Let yourself have that time. So, it really is a personal thing, but my feeling is trusting your own instincts first, getting someone else that you trust next, and then kind of working your way into more. But at any point you can work with the editor or a mentor or, development producers. It really, really is personal choice.
And when someone's looking for a script analysis service, and there's so many out there, what would you recommend?
Even more this year, there's been like a tidal wave of people coming into the industry doing script development type stuff, and more. I'm getting more calls now than I ever have. Like, I'm probably getting 3 to 5 calls a week about people who want to be developing. Wow. So it's gone crazy.
Great for you. It's wonderful. I know it's wonderful. It's a good sign that people are developing, and that's really.
They're caring about the storytelling. Yay!
Absolutely. But what, for someone looking to work with a script developer or an editor or a consultant, what advice would you give when they're looking for service? It's, a really good service.
Well, I do have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about this one thing, and that is that I want to always know who's giving me notes. I feel the services where you don't know who it is, that really doesn't work for me. But that said, I do have some clients who have gone to some of those services and had some good notes. So, that's not to say they're not good. It's just that for me personally, I want to know in what context I'm getting a note from. I want to know, perhaps it's someone who has completely different tastes than myself. You may not necessarily know that, but at least if you have a sense of who they are, whether it's just a bio or something, the idea of it being, Oz and he's behind a curtain and there's no way to know who it is. I don't go for that. And I would never want to do that. And you have to do that when you send it to an agent. You have to do that when when you're looking for an agent. You have to do that if you're in a competition. But even like with Filmarket Hub, they know who's judges, right? But a lot of these you don't know. And it feels to me like, since there's so much time that you're out of that control, you have the power to be in control when you're hiring someone, to know who it is. Yeah. And I say keep that control. Know who it is. That's my feeling about it.
Fantastic advice. And when you're working with the writers you work with, do they tend to be one-off projects, or do you often kind of mentor a writer, along a journey? How do you work in your practice?
I do both. I have fewer and fewer one-off clients because I've been actually working a lot more with production companies in the last couple of years. I kind of have gone, I went through a phase where I was working a lot with just new writers, and now I've been, I like to explore different possibilities. I'm always kind of shifting around, but at any time I will do one-off assessments. I will work with writers on one project. I will work with writers on portfolios. I have writers I've worked with for years that, they may go away for 2 years and they come back with a new idea, and then we pick it up where we left off. So it's a real kind of as needed basis. And simultaneously, I'm working with production companies trying to get some of these writers' material into those companies. If I can make a match, I love to do that. Hopefully stay on the project as long as I can. And it's not just about writing. You also want to have your stories made. So that's part of it. Is it can be really sad for a script editor to constantly say goodbye when the script's gone. It's nice to be producing and be able to see it kind of flourish and go beyond that. So I'm at that stage now, but I love, I love working with writers on multiple things when there's a really good connection with the writer. It's just natural to kind of want to help with whatever projects they're doing, if it serves them. But it's case by case. I don't feel like there are rules about these things. It's sort of like when it works, you go for it, and when it's not right, you just kind of hope for the next time.
And feedback's a tricky one, isn't it? What advice do you give to your screenwriters when they're receiving advice? How to take advice, how to receive it? Because sometimes you can get advice very different on a script. So what advice would you give to writers in terms of how to handle feedback?
So I think the key, the main thing is when you get feedback and something really touches you and you go, oh, that's something I know I've been kind of avoiding, or oh, that's, there's a truth, it touches a nerve because it's true. When it touches a nerve because it's true, look at it. If it's just like, okay, that's an opinion, then you have to kind of go, okay, maybe I'll get that. If you get that opinion many, many times, then you may go, okay, if I want this to go in this other direction where more people are going to see it, it depends on who you're writing it for. It depends on what your aspirations are in terms of your career. But when it comes to the notes themselves, I think it's a matter of do you actually wholeheartedly agree? If you wholeheartedly agree, then you got to face it. Mm-hmm. If you're in doubt, you get more opinions. You kind of go, oh, there's something to that, but I don't know. Have a couple more people, and I don't mean tons of people. I mean 1 or 2 people. Mm-hmm. Again, it's about like step by step, and then it never hurts to try something either. It never hurts to kind of go, okay, I don't agree with this, but I am going to see what would happen if I do explore that possibility. And certainly as a paid writer and a work, if you're writing with different companies, you got to have that skill anyway. So you may as well get used to it, build those muscles and try things. And then at least you have an argument. Then you can go, what, I tried that and it didn't work. And I'll tell you why it didn't work. It didn't work because it created this other problem. Yeah. Or you may be surprised and find, what, I thought that was the worst note in the world, and wow, did it make a difference? Yeah. But I think the writers that I know who are having the most success are the ones who are always willing to try. They're the ones who they don't say an immediate no, or they don't put a wall up. They kind of just absorb it, sleep on it, think about it. So what are the possibilities of that? What does that note really mean? Mm-hmm. What was that feedback about? And sometimes you think it's this huge note, and it's actually like the smallest little note. But if you don't give it the time to think about it, you don't really know. So it is a delicate thing. And I think that is one thing where script editors can help writers too, is when sometimes talking them off the ledge. But sometimes just like putting it in perspective and going, well, that's absolutely fine that they had that opinion. You sent a drama to a comedy company, what are you expecting? And like sometimes it's a very obvious kind of disconnect. And sometimes it's more subtle, but the beauty and the frustration is that we're all entitled to our own opinions. So you're going to have people who love your work, you're going to have people who hate your work, you're going to have everything in between. Yeah. And that from all the film reviews you've ever read. Like your favorite movies, there have been bad reviews about those, right? It's just how it is. So it's kind of like seeing where it touches you.
I love what you're saying about like just being open to try it, because sometimes you can probably write, a writer could be quite strong, have a strong opinion about their character, but actually giving it giving it a go might open a whole other set of new possibilities. It might not work, but if it could actually enhance the project for the better. And I guess it comes down to knowing the characters. And if and
it comes down to being able to hold your ground too, because if you haven't tried it, then it's kind of hard to say, well, no, I just don't like that idea. Whereas if you've tried it, you could say, you know what, that's gives specific reasons why it doesn't work. And producers and whoever, whether it's producer or director, you can have that conversation then.
Totally.
And then you can come up with something that works even better one way or the other. But when you kind of just say no, it's a dead end for everybody. And it's a dead end for the writer.
I suppose it's also, if they're suggesting something else or they're wanting something to change, if you can come up with alternatives as well. If you don't like them, they're giving you cracks as well. If you give alternatives to them.
Yeah, and I mean, this is all with the understanding that you're trying to tell the same story.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that does happen is people, and this happens even with professionals who've been working for years. I've seen it happen, and you're surprised when it does happen, but it happens where you'll have a producer and a writer who are both great people, great, very talented, smart people, but they're actually telling different stories. And I think that's one of the key things, is making sure that you are both telling the same story or trying to tell the same story, because otherwise that could be endless. That you're never going to connect if you think your end goal isn't the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one thing that that does get lost. Sometimes it gets lost when something gets optioned, and somebody will option something before they've even had a talk with the writer, and they have talked about what changes might be made, and then they're both in the situation where, oh, you optioned this, but you want me to change this, and maybe that so there is about communication and making sure that everybody is heading in the same direction.
What advice would you give to a writer in that scenario? Have you ever, can you think of an example there?
I think it's about trying to have a conversation and saying, obviously, if you're a brand new writer, you've never had anything optioned, and somebody wants to option your work, being as flexible as you can be to get that first credit is useful. But on the other hand, I've seen it be where somebody's doing a historical drama and a producer wanted it to be a comedy, and it just was like never going to work. Having that conversation earlier and saying, well, what kind of movie, what do hopefully the producers will have, will lead this conversation. It's harder for the writer to, but if there's not a communication coming from the producers, then I would say the writer has every right to say, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. And what kind of film are you thinking we're making? Can we talk about the end? Who are you thinking? What kind of talent might it be? Like having those kind of conversations about expectation and tone, really important.
That's really, really valuable. Wow, I thought of that. And just with the writers you work with, how do you motivate them to keep going? Because obviously it can be a very long journey, especially when you're starting out and, lots of rejections or no's.
And especially during COVID, it's really happening now. I mean, people are really struggling right now. Well, there'll be good days and bad days, but as always, but there really has been more of those days where they're feeling like, oh, not creative. Maybe just from being kind of locked in so much. It's been a lot harder for a lot of writers. And I think that what keeps, I think, just community, even though this is why I'm doing this. I want to be a part of Filmarket Hub because we need community. We need to share our experiences, and it keeps me motivated working with new writers. It keeps, hopefully, just taking action, even if it's little steps. So if you're feeling that way, trying to connect with other people doing what you do, talking about, the problems, trying new things. I mean, it's kind of, we're just trying to get through day by day. But I do think having a network, if you have a network, chances are there's going to be somebody who's having a little bit better day than you, who might be able to go, come on, well, let's just do this thing, let's just, shake it up a bit, and just remembering you're not alone. And by the way, none of us are alone, because the world is going through this.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it does feel, and in some ways, you know, writers in development, we're really lucky because we've been able to keep going in a way that a lot of people can't. So we're really, really lucky that way. But at the same time, it's still, of course, hard, and depending on your family situation and everything. But I think likening just creating support systems and being supportive for other people.
For sure.
Because when you're helping someone else, you're not thinking about your own problems, and you kind of go, oh yeah, I got to take that advice myself. That's good advice. I have to do that. You know, that happens to me all the time, kind of going, you can do it, you can do it. And kind of going, oh yeah, you can do it. And I'm talking to me as well. You know,
Yeah, that's so true. And I think writers by nature they have to be quite solitary beings a lot of the time because it's such a long process. So having community is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and by community, it doesn't have to be a huge community. It can just be, you know, a couple of friends. So don't get frightened by the word. I mean, it's just having a little bit of a network, people you trust. And, you know, if you don't have one, I would say, you know, try different things. Try a writers group, try some of these online classes and stuff, and see if you find one person that you can just kind of share experiences with. It makes a huge difference. But it is, you know, it has to be the right match. And that doesn't happen overnight, but make the effort to have that in your life, because I think long term it makes a huge difference. Honest to God, the people I know who are doing the best in the industry have a network of friends that they can go talk to, they can share their work with, they can have them read, even if it's just, what's this log line sound like? How does this sound to you? Where are the holes in this? You know, it makes a huge difference. So I just think, yeah, if you can give that to yourself, that's a huge, you're in a much stronger position already.
And in light of the COVID crisis we're in, do you have any sense the kind of shows that we're going to be seeing coming on the screens this year, next year? Do you think what do you think that the appetite is for, particularly among commissioners? And
it's really funny because I've heard so many different things lately.
Really?
I thought, you know, for a while we were hearing, oh, everyone just wants comedies and rom-coms. And then I heard there was a woman from Sky saying, oh, no, I'm just so terrified. All we're going to have is comedies and rom-coms. And, you know, we want like serious stuff as well. And I think, I mean, for me, the one thing I personally don't want, and it's just for me, is I just don't want a lot of dystopian. I kind of want something a little bit lighter, potentially. Not lighter, but like little, not so apocalyptic.
Yeah.
But that said, there's a lot of that going on too in terms of the writing. I think it's still fair game. There's room for everything, and it's individual. But there have been a lot more comedies and rom-coms in the last kind of getting commissioned recently, which is great because I love comedy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so needed in these times, isn't it?
Yeah. But that said, if you have a really great idea, there's room for anything.
Right, that's encouraging. That's really, really encouraging to hear. And it's encouraging to hear, as you said earlier, that from your experience, people are developing a lot. That should give a lot of hope to the writers out there listening to this to, you know, keep going, keep writing. There is space for them because there's, you know, so much need for content, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, obviously, the one thing that could be done to, you know, help facilitate a writing career is at this point potentially writing something small and contained.
Yes.
If you have that idea, because those are definitely things that people can make even under these circumstances. There are things being filmed. So, but again, it has to be something you really want to tell. It has to be, you know, just coming up with something to do as an exercise. I mean, that can be a great writing exercise, but it has to kind of say something as well, something that you want to say. But those are certainly being being sought after at this point.
That's really good to know. So the winner of this year's TV pilot competition gets the amazing prize of having their script read and fed back from you, but also a career development coaching session with you, which is absolutely fantastic. And I believe for all Filmarket Hub subscribers, there's going to be a special offer going out for our newsletter about an offer that you're going to give our subscribers. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I just very delighted to offer 10% off to anyone who wants to use any of my services, and it will be announced once the winners have announced, and that will all come through the Film Market Hub newsletter. But there will be an offer of 10% off, and looking forward to anyone who wants to come in and work with me.
Wow, that's an amazing offer. And Karol, thank you so much. I feel like we've had this incredible wealth of wisdom from you this morning. Thank you so much for giving me time for our talks. It's been absolutely fantastic having you. We're so grateful for all your support at Filmarket Hub, and we really look forward to continuing working with you.
Me too. And I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. It's a great opportunity for writers to be seen. And I think, yeah, really wonderful program. So delighted to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.